Welcome the anointed ones. When God marks you, not even the devil can touch you unless it's to protect his investment. Let that sink in. You've heard of bodyguards. But have you ever been so spiritually dangerous that even hell had to stand down? Listen closely. Most people have no idea what it really means to be chosen. They think it's about favor, miracles, and good vibes, but here's the raw truth. They don't tell you that being chosen means becoming a walking contradiction. You're attacked, hated, envied, yet still divinely protected in ways that don't even make sense. Here's a wild fact. Studies in neuroscience show that deep trauma survivors often develop heightened intuition and resilience. Now imagine combining that with spiritual anointing. That's not just survival, that's divine mutation, and that's you, chosen one. You weren't just covered by God, you were so set apart that your life carried a spiritual do not touch sign. People tried to break you, but heaven had alarms. Demons tried to approach, but even they got nervous. You became so wrapped in divine purpose that even the devil had to say, yeah, not this one. Touching them might get me fired. But here's the twist. Now those same people who tried to ruin you, they're sitting in regret, clutching their chests like they're the victims, crying in group chats, stalking your glow like it owes them closure. Wondering how someone they thought they buried ended up resurrecting with receipts, resilience, and radiance. So sit tight, because what you're about to hear isn't just a message, it's a revelation. A spiritual mic drop on why your anointing has not only confused your enemies, but shaken the hierarchy of darkness itself. Let's get into it. Number one, your anointing was so authentic. Even the enemy had to submit. Your anointing wasn't loud, but it was lethal to anything fake around you. You didn't have to perform, announce, or show off. Your presence alone made spirits uneasy, and not just people. We're talking about forces, energies, and realms that most don't even recognize exist. That's how real your calling is. You were born with a spiritual voltage so high, even darkness had to double-check before making a move on you. Some people got attacked, torn apart, and taken out completely. But when it came to you, there was a strange delay. Things would get close but never hit. Plots would form but fall apart mid-air. People would try to curse you and end up cursing themselves. That's not luck. That's divine jurisdiction. Even the enemy had to step back and say, we can't touch this one recklessly. Because to mess with you was to violate heavenly protocol. There are certain people that heaven protects like royalty. You are one of them. And the wildest part, you didn't even know how high your rank was. You were just trying to survive. You were just trying to heal, trying to be normal. Meanwhile, hell was holding emergency meetings, wondering why you were still standing. See, the enemy works smarter than people give credit for. He doesn't waste resources on battles he knows he can't win. So with you, he tried subtle routes, through people, betrayal, manipulation, confusion. But even then, something would always block the full impact. That something was your anointing. It wasn't about you being perfect, it was about you being chosen. And because you were chosen, the spiritual realm recognized you as off-limits. Your life was marked, not by trauma, not by failure, but by God himself. And now, the enemy is forced to sit back and watch you glow, watch you rise, watch you walk in full authority, because he couldn't touch you. So now, like everyone else, he's watching you become unstoppable. Number two, they didn't just regret losing you, they regret ever mishandling sacred territory. They thought they were just dealing with a regular person, someone they could toy with, discard, or manipulate when it suited them. But what they didn't realize is they were mishandling something sacred. You weren't just another friend, partner, or family member. You were divine access, a walking connection to grace, healing, and elevation. God placed you in their lives as a lifeline, but instead of recognizing it, they mocked it, they disrespected it. And now the regret is deeper than losing you. It's the slow, painful realization that they offended something far bigger than you. People don't always know what they're doing until it's too late. They thought they were playing games with your heart, but they were actually playing Russian roulette with a spiritual assignment. There are certain people in life who come with warning labels straight from heaven, handled with reverence. You were one of those people. You didn't come to them out of coincidence. You were sent strategically, divinely, and purposefully. But because you didn't come in a fancy package, they couldn't recognize the power you carried. They disrespected the blessing because it didn't look like the one they expected. Now the regret is eating them alive, not just because you're gone, but because their life hasn't been the same since. The favor that followed them when they were connected to you, gone. The peace they had in your presence, disrupted. The spiritual covering they never realized you provided, lifted. And all that's left is the memory of someone who was heaven sent, and the reality that they treated you like you were disposable. They thought they could walk away and upgrade. But instead they downgraded their whole life by severing a connection to divine order. You weren't just a person, you were a moment of divine alignment, and they didn't just lose you, they lost the favor that came with you. That's the kind of regret that doesn't go away. That's the kind of loss that hits harder after you're gone. Number 3, your calling was so clear, hell decided you were more useful untouched. You were such a threat to hell's agenda that the devil had to switch up his entire playbook when it came to you. Not because he liked you, not because he had mercy, but because he saw something on you that couldn't be explained, and definitely couldn't be defeated. You carried such a powerful calling that attacking you directly would have caused more damage to his own kingdom than letting you live. So instead of trying to destroy you outright, he tried to study you, delay you, distract you, but not eliminate you. That's how sacred your assignment is. You were marked for such a high level of divine impact that even hell had to be careful. The devil doesn't fear churchgoers or people who talk loud. He fears those who walk in purpose quietly and with precision. You were a walking disruption to demonic systems, even when you didn't know it. Your presence shifted atmospheres. Your words broke invisible chains. You were an earthquake walking around in human skin, and hell knew it. That's why so many strange things happened in your life. People turning on you for no reason. Opportunities suddenly blocked. Friendships that looked perfect one moment and shattered the next. It wasn't bad luck, it was spiritual interference, but even then, there was a limit. The attacks would get close but couldn't finish. They'd touch your surroundings but not your soul. You'd lose things, but never your mind. That wasn't luck. That was divine restriction. And here's the part people miss. Your anointing was too beneficial to the kingdom of light for the devil to risk going too far. He knew God would step in. He knew heaven would send reinforcements. So instead, he tried to keep you tired, distracted, second-guessing yourself. But even that didn't work. Now you're awake, now you're aware. And the enemy's plan has crumbled, because once a chosen one realizes who they really are, not even hell can hold them back. You weren't just protected, you were preserved, because your purpose is too valuable for anything or anyone to destroy. Number 4, you became the proof that destiny can't be cancelled, only delayed. They really thought they could end you. They believed if they dragged your name through the mud, if they pushed you to your breaking point, if they wore you down with constant chaos, you would disappear for good. What they didn't realize is that you weren't built on surface-level strength. You were built on purpose. That means no matter how many times they knocked you down, something divine kept pulling you back up. Because your destiny isn't based on other people's opinions, timelines, or sabotage. It's wired into your existence. They couldn't cancel it, they could only delay it. They tried everything. They messed with your mental health. They attacked your character. They whispered behind your back, smiling in your face while secretly hoping you'd collapse. And for a while it might have looked like their plan was working. You stayed quiet. You disappeared. You felt lost. But you weren't destroyed. You were being refined. While they were laughing, you were learning. While they were celebrating your silence, you were reloading your power. The setback was a setup and the delay was divine. Now they're watching you resurface stronger, sharper, and more focused than ever. And it's messing with them. Because deep down, they know they didn't just fail to stop you, they unintentionally pushed you deeper into alignment. You became the very thing they feared, proof that you can't bury a calling, that you can't kill what God breathed life into. You didn't just bounce back, you elevated. And now, they're stuck watching what they tried to destroy become undeniable. But here's the kicker. They were never really fighting you. They were fighting what you carried, a prophecy, a divine assignment, a future that threatened the lies they were living in. And now that truth is unfolding right in front of them, they don't know whether to be shocked, ashamed, or scared, because they didn't just lose. They helped create the version of you that can't be stopped. Number 5, you confused them because you were both a threat and a mirror. You weren't loud, you weren't trying to compete. You were just being yourself, walking in your truth, doing the inner work, growing in silence. But even without saying a word, you shook people to their core. Not because you attacked them, but because you reflected something they were trying hard to ignore. You exposed the gap between who they pretended to be and who they actually were, and that made you dangerous in their eyes. The hate wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came in subtle forms, backhanded compliments, weird tension, secret competition. But the root of it was envy, plain and simple. Not because you had more, but because you were more honest, more spiritually connected, more authentic. And that authenticity exposed the masks they were hiding behind. You made them uncomfortable without even trying, and that's why they couldn't love you properly. Because every time they looked at you, they were forced to see what they lacked. You were a walking mirror, reflecting the spiritual emptiness they had filled with material wins, fake confidence, and shallow relationships. You didn't need to flaunt anything. Your peace irritated their chaos. Your purpose highlighted their confusion. Your light made their shadows impossible to ignore. And instead of using that discomfort as motivation to grow, they turned it into resentment. They couldn't figure you out. You were too pure to hate, but too powerful to control. Too humble to brag, but too consistent to ignore. You didn't play the game, yet you kept rising. And the truth is, it tore them up. Because deep down, they knew you were real. You didn't just talk about God, you walked with Him. And that level of truth convicts people who have built their lives on illusions. You weren't trying to be their enemy, but your existence made their excuses invalid. And when people can't dim your light, they'll either run from it or try to break the bulb. But none of it worked, because you weren't just a reflection of what they could be. You were the reminder of what they chose not to become. Number 6, you were sent to be the exit, but they chose their chains. You weren't just a person. They were given a chance through you, a chance to grow, to heal, to break out of generational cycles they swore they were tired of. But when the time came, they didn't walk through the door you represented. They slammed it shut. Not because they didn't see your value, but because the truth you carried made them uncomfortable. You came with light, and light exposes everything people work hard to keep hidden. You were the answer to silent prayers they forgot they even whispered. You were the moment of divine interruption that could have changed everything. But when you showed up, they didn't recognize you as a blessing. You didn't come in the form they were expecting. You didn't coddle their dysfunction. You didn't let them stay small. You challenged their excuses, shattered their false narratives, and held up a mirror to everything they needed to confront. And for that, they called you the problem. The truth is, not everyone really wants freedom. Some people are so used to their pain, they've made it home. Bondage becomes comfortable when it's all someone has known. You came offering healing, growth, elevation, but they weren't ready to give up the trauma that made them feel important. You came offering unconditional love, and they twisted it, pushed it away, and projected their wounds onto you. They didn't reject you, they rejected what you triggered in them. You made them feel seen in ways they weren't ready for. Now they're sitting in the same mess, replaying the same cycles, still haunted by the opportunity they missed. They lost the one person who could have helped pull them out. And not because you failed, but because they chose their familiar chains over an unfamiliar breakthrough. You were sent to be the exit, but they loved the prison more than the price of freedom, and now they live with the heavy truth. They crucified the cure. Number 7, they didn't realize they were plotting against their own redemption. They thought they were winning when they talked about you behind your back, when they lied on your name, when they tried to turn others against you. But what they didn't know is that by targeting you, they were waging war on their own breakthrough. You weren't just someone passing through their life. You were strategically placed, sent to intercede, cover, and help them unlock levels in their own destiny they didn't even know they had access to, but they couldn't see past their ego, jealousy, or insecurity. And in trying to take you down, they sabotaged their own spiritual lifeline. You were the one who would have stood in the gap for them. You were the one who saw their brokenness and still chose to love them, support them, and speak life over them. You knew their trauma. You felt their pain. You were patient with their dysfunction. You even tried to carry weight that wasn't yours. And yet they turned around and made you the villain in a story where you were the only one trying to help. They weren't just betraying a friend. They were betraying a divine covering. Because, whether they knew it or not, Your prayers were keeping doors open. Your presence was shifting spiritual atmospheres in their favor. You were fighting battles they didn't even know they were in. But betrayal has consequences, spiritual ones. What they threw at you came back around, but heavier. Because when you aim to destroy someone God has assigned to you, you're not just moving in malice, you're moving in rebellion against heaven's order. Now, they're living in the fallout. Things are crumbling. Peace is gone. Doors are closed. The very pain they wanted you to feel is now sitting in their own lap. Not because you wished it on them, but because they invited it by cutting off the blessing that was sent to lift them higher. They weren't plotting against a person. They were plotting against their own redemption. And that's a loss no apology can undo. Number 8, the ones who mocked your pain are now choking on their own silence. When you were going through the darkest seasons of your life, they didn't offer help. They offered entertainment. They watched your struggle like it was a show. Your tears were the punchline. Your pain became group chat material. Some of them acted like they cared, but the smirks behind your back told the truth. You were the target of jokes, gossip, and low-key celebration because deep down, your downfall made them feel better about their own emptiness. They didn't just witness your pain, they fed off it, but God doesn't miss. He saw it all, every silent betrayal, every passive-aggressive jab, every fake checking in that was really just a way to measure how low you had fallen. And while you were sitting in silence, fighting for your life, they were busy adding insult to injury. They thought you were finished. They thought your struggle meant you'd never rise again, but they misunderstood who they were mocking, because now tables have turned, and not quietly. You didn't just bounce back, you came back glowing, growing, and guarded, and suddenly their voices vanished. The same ones who laughed the loudest can't find the words, not because they're being mature, but because guilt has gripped their throats. They can't even mention your name without remembering how they played you, how they enjoyed your suffering. And now your success is a mirror they can't avoid. Their silence used to feel like rejection, now it feels like regret. That awkward tension, that's not confusion, that's shame. And it's loud. They're not quiet because they're unbothered. They're quiet because you remind them of their character or lack of it. They can't clap for you, can't congratulate you, can't support you, because doing that would mean admitting they were wrong. And their pride is choking them harder than life ever could. Their silence isn't power anymore, it's punishment, and they earned it. Number 9, you were the test they failed, and now God's using you as the example. You weren't just someone passing through their life. You were a divine test, a carefully timed opportunity disguised as a regular person. God sent you not for entertainment, not for drama, but to see how they would handle someone carrying his presence in real form. Not with titles, not with ego, but with purity, discernment, and an anointing that couldn't be faked. You came into their life wrapped in humility, but you carried heaven's weight, and how they treated you revealed what was hidden in them. They didn't just fail the test, they failed it loud, publicly, and without remorse. They had a chance to honor you, cover you, support you, or simply love you. But instead they belittled you, took advantage, tried to compete, mocked what they didn't understand. They thought they were rejecting someone ordinary, someone easy to replace. But they were actually rejecting the very thing they claimed to be praying for, an encounter with the divine. People don't always know when they're being tested. That's the whole point. God doesn't test character when it's easy. He tests it when it's inconvenient. And instead of rising to the occasion, they exposed themselves. The lies came out. The jealousy leaked through. The betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was a revelation. And God saw it all. Now they're watching from the sidelines, stuck in the same place they were before you came into their life, only now with the heavy awareness that they missed something rare. And God, in his divine sense of justice, is using your elevation as the lesson. He's making your rise public, your growth undeniable, your glow unmissable, not to flex, but to teach. You're the proof of what happens when someone handles divine favor correctly. And they're the proof of what happens when they mishandle it. You were their test, and they failed. But now, your life is the example. And every blessing that unfolds from here is a reminder that God takes how people treat his chosen ones very personally. Number 10, your presence exposed their demons. That's why they had to flee. You didn't do anything to them, at least not on the surface. You were kind, respectful, even quiet at times. But the moment you entered their space, something shifted. Not because you were loud or confrontational, but because your spirit carried weight. Real spiritual weight. The kind that doesn't just walk into a room, it shakes it. You didn't have to call anyone out or expose anyone's secrets. Your presence did it all by itself. They couldn't explain why being around you made them uncomfortable. But that discomfort had nothing to do with your actions. It had everything to do with your frequency. Your light irritated the demons they refused to confront. Your honesty rubbed against the lies they lived in. Your peace disrupted the chaos they secretly depended on. You didn't come to destroy them, but being near you made their masks slip. And for some, that felt like war. People say you were too much, acting better than others, or changed after healing. But that's just projection. What they really meant was, I can't hide in front of you. Because your growth reminded them of their stagnation. Your healing reflected their avoidance. And your authenticity made their performance look obvious. So they distanced themselves, not to protect their peace, but to avoid the internal war your light triggered. The irony is they thought you were the toxic one. But the truth is they couldn't stand to be seen without their shadows. You weren't attacking them, you were activating a mirror. And when people aren't ready to look at themselves, they blame the one holding the reflection. They didn't flee because you were harmful. They fled because their demons couldn't breathe near someone who radiates truth. And rather than admit they weren't ready to evolve, they left and blamed you for the exposure. But deep down they know the truth. Your presence didn't hurt them. It convicted them. And conviction is uncomfortable when you're committed to hiding. Number 11, even the devil knew you had a deadline on your suffering. There's a reason everything felt like it was crashing all at once. The pressure, the betrayal, the isolation, the spiritual warfare that came out of nowhere and didn't let up. It wasn't random. It wasn't because you were doing something wrong. It was because your breakthrough was closer than it had ever been, and hell knew it. The enemy doesn't go after people who aren't a threat. He doesn't waste time attacking what's already lost, but you were on the edge of a divine shift, and that terrified darkness. You had a deadline on your suffering, a divine expiration date, and as it started to approach, everything tried to break you. The chaos became louder, the confusion increased, people you loved turned cold, opportunities vanished. Your mental and emotional strength was tested in ways that made you question everything, including your faith. But that wasn't punishment. That was the final stretch. That was proof that you were nearing deliverance. The devil wasn't attacking you because you were failing. He was attacking because you were almost out of the cycle, out of the pain, out of the patterns that kept you stuck. He could sense the shift in the spirit, and panic set in. Because once you stepped out, once you fully healed, once you recognized your authority, he'd lose access for good, and he knew it. That's why the last part hurt the most. That's why the attacks felt personal. Because they were. You weren't just surviving anymore, you were evolving. You weren't begging for peace, you were becoming peace. And that's when hell started throwing its final shots. Not to stop you, but to delay you, hoping you'd give up before you crossed over. But you didn't. You held on, you kept going. And now you're living proof that suffering may last for a night, but it does have a deadline. And the enemy can't do anything about it once heaven says, time's up. Number 12, they regret hurting you, because now they see God was watching the entire time. They really believed they got away with it. The lies, the manipulation, the passive aggression, the betrayal they executed so casually while pretending they were innocent. To them, it was just another game of control, power, and ego. They thought no one saw the smear campaigns, the guilt trips, the emotional games played behind closed doors. But what they didn't account for was that God was in the room, and he never left. The same God who knows every hair on your head, who collects every tear you cried like precious jewels, was taking notes. Not just watching, but recording. Every word they spoke in secret, every plan they plotted in shadows, every fake smile they wore while hoping for your downfall. It was never hidden from him. While they were mocking you, heaven was building a case. And now the consequences have arrived, not as coincidence, not as karma, but as divine correction. And that correction hits different, because it's personal to God when his chosen ones are mistreated. He doesn't just avenge, he teaches. Now they're living in the results of their own behavior, and it's undeniable. Doors are closing, peace is gone, relationships are falling apart, and the worst part, they can trace it back to you, to the moment they mishandled what heaven sent, to the time they hurt someone God assigned to bless them. Now they regret it, not just because of what they lost, but because they can feel the judgment. There's no hiding from it, no escaping it. The same people who once laughed at your suffering are now being humbled by their own. And that silence you hear, it's not peace, it's the weight of conviction, the guilt, the realization that God wasn't just watching, he was keeping the receipts. This isn't about revenge, it's not about payback, it's about justice. God is showing them that hurting his chosen ones comes with a cost. And the price isn't paid in one moment, it's paid in watching you rise while they fall under the weight of their own decisions. Number 13, they didn't just lose you, they lost access to their own breakthrough. They thought walking away from you was just another move, just another choice in the game. They thought replacing you would be easy, like you were common, like the role you played in their life could be filled by anyone. What they didn't realize is that you weren't just a person, you were a portal, a walking connection to the next level. Your presence came with favor, wisdom, and alignment. But they mishandled it, disconnected from you, and in doing so unknowingly severed their own spiritual momentum. You were their bridge. God sent you into their life not just to bless them, but to advance them. The doors they were praying for, you were holding the key, the peace they longed for, you were carrying it in your spirit. The strategies, the insight, the covering, they had access to all of that through relationship with you. But instead of recognizing the divine setup, they treated you like a stepping stone. They walked away thinking they were leveling up, but in truth, they fell back into cycles they thought they'd already outgrown. Now they're watching everyone around you rise, not because you're trying to stunt on them, but because divine order is at work. The same anointing they thought was no big deal is the same one breaking barriers for others who treat it with honor. And that's what stings most. Watching the people they assumed were beneath them, now soaring in peace, success, and elevation, all because they stayed connected to you with respect. It's not jealousy they're dealing with. It's the sting of divine recompense, God showing them in real time what they forfeited, not to hurt them, but to teach them. Because when you lose someone heaven assigned to elevate you, it's not just personal, it's spiritual. You don't just lose a relationship, you lose a realm. And now they're stuck watching the next level walk right past them, wearing the face they once disrespected. Number 14. Your story is proof that divine favor doesn't need validation. It provokes regret on its own. You never begged for recognition. You didn't campaign for validation. You weren't in anyone's face trying to convince them of your value. You just stayed true, quietly doing the work, privately healing, and faithfully walking in your calling, even when no one was clapping. And now, the very people who ignored you, doubted you, and even tried to ruin your name are watching you shine with a glow they can't touch, explain, or stop. That's divine favor. It doesn't argue, it doesn't shout, it just shows up and shifts the entire atmosphere. The power of your story is that it proves favor doesn't need anyone's permission to operate. It's not based on popularity, approval, or public applause. It's rooted in heaven's endorsement. And that kind of favor confuses people, especially the ones who thought they had the authority to block you. They assumed their silence would silence you. They believed if they distanced themselves, it would strip you of your influence. But what they didn't know is that your elevation wasn't tied to them. It was tied to obedience. You kept showing up even with a broken heart. You kept sowing even when you had nothing left. You kept praying even when your own faith was hanging by a thread. Now the tables have turned. You didn't have to retaliate or expose anyone. God did that for you. Strategically, silently, and powerfully, one breakthrough at a time, one blessing after another. And with every move he makes in your life, regret hits them harder. Not because you're gloating, but because they realized too late who you really were. They laughed, they doubted, they dismissed you. But favor has a funny way of making people remember. And yours is the kind even hell respects. Not because you're perfect, but because you're purposeful. You carry something eternal. And now, they can't avoid it. Your life is loud now, and not from your mouth, but from your elevation. That's the kind of statement no hater can silence. Everything they tried to do to break you only revealed how unbreakable you really were. The lies, the betrayal, the mockery, it all backfired. And not by your hand, but by divine order. While they were busy trying to bury you, God was planting you. And now you're blooming in a season they never believed you'd survive. You were the blessing they rejected, the exit they ignored, the lifeline they cut off. And now they're living in the regret of a decision they can't undo. What they failed to understand is that you weren't fighting for validation. You were walking in assignment. You weren't trying to prove anything. You were embodying purpose. And when someone mishandles divine purpose, there's always a cost. Your story is proof that God watches everything. He saw your silent tears, your private prayers, your quiet strength, and now He's responding, not with petty revenge, but with undeniable elevation. You've become the message, you've become the mirror, you've become the very evidence that favor can't be faked, sabotaged, or silenced. They didn't just lose a person, they lost access to destiny, and now they're stuck watching God prepare a table for you in full view. Your glow isn't just healing you, it's haunting them. Not out of spite, but out of divine correction, because when heaven sends someone into your life and you choose to betray them, you don't just forfeit relationship, you forfeit the favor that came with it. Let them talk. Let them watch. Let them sit in silence, because this is your moment, not to prove them wrong, but to live in everything that was always yours. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't even need their apology. You already won. If this message hit home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and join a community that sees the unseen and speaks the truth that others won't. Tap the like button to let us know this resonated with your journey, and drop a comment below. We want to hear how your story aligns, because you're not alone in this. And most importantly, share this video with someone who needs that divine reminder that they're not crazy, not broken, and definitely not forgotten. Someone out there is in the middle of their test, and your share might be the lifeline they've been waiting for. We're growing, we're glowing, and we're walking in divine fire together. So stick with us, because what's coming next, it's going to blow your mind. God bless you.